Irrespective of the training style that you utilise, whether that be a high volume approach or higher intensity approach, there'll come a point within a given workout where any sets you do past that point thereafter are simply counterproductive and may actually hinder your ability to gain more muscle mass. So where is that point? That's the golden question. How many sets should you do before you call it a day? I don't think there's a human on the planet that can answer that with any degree of certainty. There's just simply too many variables that can affect that on a weekly, daily and even hourly basis. And do you know what, in my opinion, the day we know that for certain will be a sad day for bodybuilding. It'll take the fun away, in my opinion. The discovery process of learning to build a better body. Everyone will train the same, and that's why I love bodybuilding so much, because there are so many different ways of going about getting the job done. You can train fast, you can train slow, you can train high volume, high intensity, different training protocols, advanced training techniques, drop sets, forced reps, rest pause, statics, loose form, strict form. There are just so many different ways of building a bigger and stronger body. Now, I can't tell you with any degree of certainty how many sets you should do for a muscle within a given workout, but what I can do is give you a general rule of thumb, explain my training philosophies, and tell you what I have done to build my physique as a lifetime natural bodybuilder, someone that hasn't used any supplements for the last 6 years. My underlying principles on this subject are quite simple. I think first we need to understand the relationship though between volume and intensity, which is something I've spoken about before. This is crucial for determining roughly how many sets you should do for a given workout. I still get asked this on a very regular occasion. How many sets should I do for this body part? How many sets for that body part? There is no magic number. But once you understand training intensity and the relationship that has with volume and how that affects your ability to do less or more sets, you can start to understand roughly how many sets you should be programming in for a given session. When I think about intensity and volume, I always imagine a scale or a continuum. On the far left, you've got maximal intensity, minimal volume, and of course you have to have some volume, otherwise you wouldn't get any sets done. On the far right, you've got maximal volume, minimal intensity, and again there has to be some intensity there, otherwise there'd be no sets, you wouldn't move any weight. So it's a relationship between the two, and I'll give you an extreme of both. So let's say you bench press 10 rep max is 80 kilos. You do 3 warm-up sets, you load the weight up to 80k and you do 10 reps. That last rep was a 3-second rep. It was a real grinder. There was no way that you'd be able to do 11 reps on your own. And you rest 2 minutes and then you go again. And that set is maybe 7 or 8. So you're unable to replicate that same level of work effort. Your reps have been cut down, and try as you might feel like it's the same kind of effort, but it's truly not, because the body can't replicate those reps you did on that first set. So from a true maximum intensity ethos, you kind of think to yourself, well, why bother with that second set? If my body has already reached maximum intensity, I'm therefore unable to replicate that. No matter how many more sets I try, it's only going to go downhill from here. So we'll just stick with that one set. And that approach is and has been used to build great physiques. Now, on the other hand, a high volume approach, let's go to the extreme again, and we'll go with 80k as your 10 rep max for bench. This time we'll only load the weight up to 70k and we'll do 20 sets of 5. So the weight and the intensity is low enough that you're able to replicate that same workload 20 times without seeing any real fatigue. The first set, the last set look identical. So the intensity is very low and you're therefore able to replicate that many times. And of course, that's a really exaggerated example of high volume training. Probably not conducive to building bigger muscles as a natural bodybuilder. The intensity just isn't high of each set. Whatever sets that you choose to do, there has to be a minimal intensity reach, and I can talk about that in a different video. I would always err on the side of high intensity. If I had to choose one method or the other, many easy sets versus only one maximal intensity set, then I would all day, every day choose the latter for bodybuilding purposes. So in the middle of that, you might do maybe 4 sets of 7 or 8 reps at your 10 rep max. On the bench press 80k, you're doing a lot more sets you would do with the maximal intensity set at 10 or 10 plus reps at the 80k, but you're doing nowhere near the amount of sets you would do on the super high volume approach at 70k for 20 sets of 5. The point I'm trying to make is that you base the number of sets you should do off of the intensity that you plan to train at, whether that be per session or per training block. You just allocate it accordingly. So if you want to maybe go balls to the wall for 6 weeks, train super high intensity, then you need to the correct amount of sets to that. There's no point saying I'm going to do 20 sets maximal intensity. The body just simply won't allow for it. It has to be one or the other. The kind of protocol that I'm using at the moment is 1 set of maximum intensity, so I'm only doing 1 working set per muscle group, and then the following session on the same muscle group in that same week will be higher volume, still intense enough to elicit the response I want, i.e. bigger muscles, but certainly more volume and not as hard as that first set, so kind of leaving some in the tank, maybe not using advanced training techniques, stuff like that. So I created this diagram to further illustrate the point that I'm trying to make and maybe actually provide some numbers that you can utilise going forwards within your own training. So of course this is very generalised. It's going to vary person to person and can change dependent on your recovery ability at the time. There are a lot of things that can affect that, namely sleep quality, sleep length, food intake, hydration levels, stress management, the work that you do, your job, the level of physical activity that you do around training sessions. There's a whole host of things that can affect your ability to recover from a stimulus, and that's going to change all the time. I should also note that frequency will affect the number of sets you do per session, but over a weekly period, it should kind of add up to roughly the same whether you do 1, 2 or 3 sessions per week, there or thereabouts. Frequency will affect the number of sets you do per session. So with higher frequency will come less sets per session, obviously, because you just don't have time to do 20 sets plus on each muscle group, each session you do, on a full body routine. It's just not going to happen. You'll be in the gym all day. So we'll start at the bottom and we'll go into the easiest intensity, so we're not close to failure. This is something I've never trained at. Unfortunately, I'd say too many people do train at this level. The level of sets you can do at this intensity would be quite high indeed, probably 20, 22, maybe even more than that, a significant amount of sets because the intensity is so low. I really wouldn't recommend doing too much work in this intensity personally, but again, like I said, we're not talking about intensity, we're talking about number of sets, and if you want to do those number of sets, then that's kind of what the intensity you're going to need to be doing, otherwise you just won't be able to recover. Okay, so as the intensity goes up, closer to failure, perhaps 2 or 3 reps in the bag of each set that you do, you're looking at maybe 15 to 22 reps, there or thereabouts. And again, just going to reiterate, this is a very generalised plan here. So as the sets get harder, you should really be doing 9 to 15, just shy of failure. So it's kind of leaving like 1 rep in the bag maybe. And then reaching the point of positive failure. So that means when you're pressing a weight, for example, like a bench press, it's a really, really hard rep, 2 or 3 reps, and there's probably no way that you do an 11th rep. You fail on the 10th rep, and you don't actually try the 11th rep. You just rack it and assume you failed on the 10th. The positive phase of the movement is always the weakest, so that's what's going to fail first. Now, using advanced techniques, you can take the set past that point, which brings us on to the next intensity level. Very hard. Using 1 to 2 force reps with a training partner or negatives. You could use maybe some looser form if you were training on your own, back and arms. Maybe some overhead press, like you could use your legs when you're doing military press to further increase the intensity of the set. Take it past that point of positive failure. There are a number of ways to do it, but it's certainly a lot easier when you've got a training partner. You should really do 3 to 6 sets per muscle group per week on that, as it's quite hard to recover from indeed. Then you've got the top intensity, which is basically all out, balls to the wall, as hard as you can make it. Very, 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 very few people train at this intensity. It's incredibly rare to see. There's a reason for that, because it's bloody difficult. Extremely debilitating, very, very difficult to recover from. So using rest pause, drop sets, statics, force negatives, where you've got a training partner increasing the weight of the negative, because the negative is a stronger portion of the movement. So I did do a video on this on the back rows not too long ago, and that showcases that technique, but it's very, very difficult. And you really have to be training with a partner for this. It's just too difficult to do on your own. You might be able to get away with it on some exercises like rest pause, but it's just going to be so much better when you've got a training partner. So 1 to 3 sets on that per muscle group per week, maybe even less than that. It's that difficult to recover from. Also depends on the exercise that you're doing. If you're going to do something like squat or leg press or deadlift with that style, it's going to be so difficult. It's going to ruin, any work that you do for the next few days thereafter. It's that difficult. So you have to use it very, very sparingly. And I do think there's a time and a place for it. But the sets allocated to that kind of intensity are so low for a reason. So I've probably spent most of my time in the middle 4 tiers, more specifically the 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 15 sets per muscle per week at those allocated intensities. I don't think I've ever done any work in the easy, not close to failure bracket. Maybe a little bit. Unfortunately, I think that's where most people still lie. People generally don't train hard enough. I would say you really want to be focusing on those top 5 tiers, to be honest, in my opinion. But good physiques have been built, on any of those tiers. Very, very low sets, very, very high sets at lower intensities. It can be done, but I think for me personally, and it's what I enjoy as well, I prefer the higher intensities and subsequently lower set numbers per muscle group per week. I've spent very little time in the top tier as well, simply because I haven't had access to a consistent training partner. It's very important to have a training partner to allow you to train with that kind of intensity. And honestly, that kind of intensity for most people, I'm not being condescending, would be shocking. It simply wouldn't be able to create the mental intensity to be able to deliver the physical intensity to produce that kind of stimulus. So a lot of my training has been in the very hard category, using maybe looser form to mimic forced reps when I've been training on my own, using maybe a drop set or some rest pause work to kind of carry on the set past that point of positive failure. And it's possible to do on your own, but certainly a lot better when you have a training partner. But that top bracket, you really need a training partner to help you out on that. I think you should be thinking about at least something like this tier system every time you enter the gym for a workout. And you can actually utilize this to help you design a training protocol. So let's say you want to do an 8-week protocol, pick the intensity or 2 tiers that you want to train at, and then allocate the number of sets accordingly. So let's say you've been training at a higher volume, doing a good amount of sets at a lower intensity, then maybe try a higher intensity workout and drop the number of sets accordingly. Perhaps you've already been training really, really hard, but you've been doing 15 to 20 sets, and maybe drop the sets down to the recommendations that I've outlined. See how that influences your physique and strength levels over an 8-week period. So give it a go. As I say, once again, it's a general rule of thumb. It's nothing too specific, and this is going to differ from person to person. But I think, if you follow it with a pinch of salt, you really can't go wrong, and I'm sure you'll see some benefits. So thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, then please like it. Really, really helps out. Any questions you've got, then feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Subscribe to see more true natural bodybuilding videos. Check out my Instagram. The link is in the description box below. Stay strong.